So, let me tell you this. I have paid luxury money for a $40 movement and it sucks. And somewhere right now, someone is making the same mistake, thinking it is a flex. I don't want you to be like me and that someone. So, I'll tell you about 7 brands that have built entire businesses on an illusion. Buy these brands and live to regret it. By the end of this list, you won't walk past a fashion watch counter the same way again. 7. Ice Watch. Walk through the accessories wall at any mall kiosk, and you'll find them stacked by color. $60 to $90, bright as candy under the fluorescent lights. Blue, orange. A pink so loud, it practically hums. Credit where it's due first. Ice Watch never pretended to be Swiss horology. The brand launched out of Belgium in the mid-2000s, selling exactly one idea: a plastic case, a rotating color wheel of straps, and a price low enough that a parent could say yes without thinking twice. It sells color, size, and the feeling of owning something loud enough to notice across a room. For a first real watch, or a beach accessory nobody will cry over if it gets lost, the pitch is honest enough. So how do they hit that price? A Miyota quartz movement, the same Japanese engine sitting inside watches that cost $20, sealed into a plastic case. Ice Watch itself describes as shock-resistant. It means the watch is built to survive being dropped, not to be admired up close. Remember that description. A few entries from now, a considerably more expensive brand is going to lean on nearly identical language, Swiss-made quartz, to justify a price 40 times higher, and the movement inside won't be 40 times better. Then reality sets in on Ice Watch specifically. Do the math on what you're paying for durability and the whole pitch falls apart fast. A basic Casio built for genuine daily abuse costs roughly the same $20 as the movement hiding inside an Ice Watch, and comes with a reputation for surviving years of rough treatment without complaint. Ice Watch charges 3 to 4 times that price for a case explicitly designed around looking good in a photo rather than surviving contact with the actual world. You're not paying extra for toughness. You're paying extra for the color wheel. Crack open the customer reviews, and the same 3 complaints repeat like a stuck metronome. Bands snapping after a few weeks of normal wear. Cases fogging from the inside after a swim the packaging swore it could handle. Customer service that goes quiet the moment a warranty claim actually gets filed. One buyer describes sending 4 unanswered emails about a watch that stopped charging at 10 months old. Another watch the case seems crack apart before the first year was even out, then got told the warranty considered that cosmetic. This isn't one unlucky unit. It's a pattern, repeated across hundreds of reviews, on a product engineered to be replaced, not repaired. Real quick, before we go any further, have you owned one of these? Scroll through unboxing videos online, and the marketing strategy becomes obvious in about 15 seconds. Ice Watch leans hard into haul culture, sending creators color-matched sets to film against a bedspread, stacking 3 or 4 watches in a single video like the point was never really about telling time at all. It's a smart strategy for a brand built on color rotation. It also means the actual durability of the product almost never comes up in the content designed to sell it, because a 15-second unboxing video ends long before the first band snap happens. Here's the detail almost nobody brings up. In 2012, LEGO sued Ice Watch and won. Not over the watch, over the packaging. The little transparent plastic display cube the watches shipped in looked too much like a stackable Lego brick, and a court agreed. Sit with that for a second. The single most legally distinctive design decision this brand ever made wasn't the timepiece, it was the box it came in. And the pricing has quietly crept upward while nothing underneath it changed. Ice Watch built its whole identity on being cheap and disposable. Wander into that same kiosk today, and pieces are creeping past $100. For the same plastic case, the same off-the-shelf movement, dressed in a slightly fancier dial and called a Baladé or a Cosmos instead of a basic quartz. The brand didn't get better, it got confident. Compare that trajectory to Swatch, the brand Ice Watch is most often mistaken for at a glance. Swatch built its entire identity around disposable plastic quartz decades earlier, and mostly kept its pricing honest about what that meant. Ice Watch borrowed the aesthetic without borrowing the humility. A Swatch at $40 knows exactly what it is. An Ice Watch pushing past $100 is starting to forget. Somewhere, a 15-year-old is picking out her 3rd Ice Watch this year because the first 2 didn't survive gym class. Nobody told her that isn't supposed to be normal. It's just what happens when the watch is designed to be outgrown, not outworn. Ice Watch sells you a color you'll get bored of before the battery dies. Brand number 6 sells you something shinier and considerably more painful to lose. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. 6. JBW. JBW stands for Just Bling Watch, which is either the most honest brand name on this entire list or a small confession, depending on your mood that day. There's no pretending about what this brand is chasing, and there's something almost refreshing about a company that names itself so plainly. Founded in Dallas in 2008 by siblings Amir and Shabina Maghani, whose family had been distributing watches since their grandfather started the business in India decades earlier, JBW found its lane fast. Hip-hop culture wanted diamonds on everything, and a watch is a lot easier to check on a wrist than a chain around a neck. The brand has since claimed to have set more than 7 million diamonds into its watches. That's not a small operation. That's a genuine supply chain, and it deserves a little respect for what it built. And to be fair, those diamonds are real. This isn't a cubic zirconia con. What JBW is actually selling is Melee diamonds. Tiny stones, some barely a millimeter wide, worth only a few dollars a piece, set in volume across a dial or bezel to create the visual impression of a much bigger investment than what's actually there. A single model can carry anywhere from 8 to 570 of them, depending on how much you're willing to spend. Jewelers grade Melee stones in bulk lots rather than certifying each one individually, the way a solitaire engagement ring would be graded, which is exactly why clarity issues can slip through in volume without anyone catching them before the watch ships. So what happens once volume becomes the entire strategy? Reviews. That's what happens. Pages of them, once you know to go looking. The Better Business Bureau complaint file tells you plainly. One buyer reported diamonds coming loose within 2 wears. Another said stones started falling out a single week after delivery, with cloudy, defect-riddled clarity the company itself acknowledged in writing when the customer sent photos. A third watch, gifted for a birthday, lost a diamond after being worn exactly twice, and the seller stopped responding once a refund was requested instead of a replacement. Picture that gift moment for a second, because it happens constantly with this brand. Someone saves for weeks, picks out the iced-out model, wraps it, watches a partner's face light up opening the box. 6 weeks later, a tiny gap where a stone used to sit becomes the only thing either of them can see when they look at the watch. JBW sells through its own site, through JomaShop, and through department stores like Macy's, which lends the brand a kind of borrowed legitimacy simply by sitting on the same shelf as recognized names. A shopper browsing a Macy's watch counter isn't necessarily thinking about where a given brand's diamonds came from or how they were graded. They're thinking about the counter itself, and the assumption that anything sold there has already cleared some baseline of quality control. Real question. Would you rather have 3 real but nearly invisible diamonds, or one you can actually see from across a room? That's the trap. JBW isn't lying about what's inside. It's counting on buyers not doing the math on what genuine diamonds actually means when each stone costs less than a fast food combo meal. Quantity, dressed up as luxury. I'll be honest, this one bothers me more than most brands on this list. There's nothing dishonest in the marketing copy itself. The dishonesty lives in what buyers assume diamond watch means, and JBW never once corrects the assumption. Compare the price tags for a second. A JBW piece with a modest diamond count runs somewhere in the low hundreds of dollars. A single 1-carat solitaire diamond, properly certified, can cost more than the entire watch. Nobody buying JBW is under the illusion they're getting a 1-carat stone for $200. But diamond watch, as a phrase, does a lot of quiet, unearned work in a jewelry counter conversation, and JBW built an entire company on letting that phrase do the talking. Set a JBW next to a genuine entry-level diamond watch from an actual jewelry house, and the difference isn't really visible at arm's length, which is exactly the point of the design. It's only up close, with the diamonds falling out of their setting 6 weeks in, that the gap between the two becomes impossible to ignore. Bling wears off, sometimes literally. What comes next doesn't even try to hide where it's really made. It just hopes nobody bothers to ask. 5. Technomarine. In December 2009, Technomarine partnered with Willie Revillame, the biggest noontime television host in the Philippines and the face of the variety show Wowee, to launch a signature watch line built around him. Patriotic red, yellow, and blue on the dial. A Philippine flag worked into the design, his signature engraved on the caseback. Revillame had already been seen wearing the brand on air before the deal existed, which is precisely why Technomarine came calling. Sales in the region spiked. That's not a metaphor. It's a documented endorsement deal, and for a while, it actually worked. Before that wave, Technomarine had built a smaller but coherent reputation around a specific look. Nautical-themed, brightly colored, interchangeable bezel watches that leaned hard into look, don't overthink it design. Serious divers and dress watch purists ignored the brand completely. Everyone else seemed to like the idea of swapping a plastic ring and changing the entire mood of the watch on their wrist. It's worth pausing on why a single television endorsement could move sales numbers at all for a watch brand. Most fashion watch marketing runs through magazine spreads and boutique window displays, slow building brand association over years. Technomarine skipped that entirely and bought instant, mass visibility by attaching itself to a host millions of people already invited into their homes every single day. It's an actually clever growth hack in the same category as an influencer partnership today. The problem with borrowed visibility is that it comes with a borrowed audience, one that leaves the moment the host does, and a brand that never built a deeper reason to stay has nothing left to hold that audience once attention moves on to something else. Then it went mainstream, and the very thing that made it interesting started working against it. Watch forums that once mostly shrugged at Technomarine turned sharply once mass popularity brought mass scrutiny with it. One long-running Watch You Seek thread put it bluntly: buyers who paid $1,200 for a black watch model couldn't explain why, beyond raw size, it was worth anywhere near that price. Another owner described 3 brand new Technomarines purchased at once. One broke within 2 wears, the stem spinning freely, unable to set the time or date at all. The company's response, according to that same owner, was that stem failure fell outside the warranty, on a watch worn exactly twice. And here's the detail the brand doesn't advertise anywhere near its boutique counters. Technomarine is owned by Invicta, the same corporate parent behind the industry's most notorious inflated price tactics, running a second brand that trades on a completely different image, flashier, more designer, aimed at a crowd that would likely never buy something wearing the Invicta name directly on the dial. That's not a coincidence so much as a strategy. One company running 2 storefronts, selling a similar underlying value proposition to 2 audiences who rarely compare notes. Some Technomarine automatic models do carry a genuine ETA 2824 movement, a respected workhorse caliber used across the Swiss industry, which is the one honestly good thing forum regulars will grant the brand. But the case construction and water resistance claims rarely hold up to what a dedicated dive watch actually needs, which is exactly why serious divers pass the brand over entirely, regardless of what movement sits inside it. A watch can have a fine engine and still be the wrong tool for the job it claims to do. By the time that wave of attention faded, so did the cultural cachet. Watches that once sold for the local equivalent of $800 in the boutique started turning up on resale sites for half that within a couple of years, sometimes less. The community that once tolerated the brand as a guilty pleasure now treats it as something closer to a punchline. Diamonds on plastic. One forum regular called the brand's entire original concept, and the label stuck harder than any marketing campaign ever did. Look closely at Technomarine's own retail pricing today, and you'll spot the family resemblance to Invicta's playbook immediately. Watches routinely appear online with a suggested retail price crossed out and a discounted figure sitting beside it, sometimes a discount running past 70 or 80% off. That's not a clearance sale happening once a year. That's the everyday pricing structure, the same illusion of scarcity and savings that built Invicta's entire business, just running quietly under a different brand name at the same parent company. Somewhere, someone still has the Technomarine they won on television, sitting in a drawer, worth a fraction of what it once represented on a stage under studio lights. At least Technomarine never pretended to build its own movements from scratch. The next two names on this list are counting on you never checking who actually makes the watch behind the logo. 4. Guess. Here's a fact that should change how you look at an entire wall of department store watches. Guess does not make watches. Timex does. Not Timex adjacent. Not a factory that also happens to do Timex work on the side. Guess licenses its name to Timex Group, the same company responsible for the $35 Timex Weekender sitting 2 shelves over in that exact same store. Different logo. Often a price tag 4 or 5 times higher. Same manufacturer, same movement, family, frequently even the same case supplier on the back end. So why does the Guess version cost so much more? Because Guess reads as fashion-forward and aspirational, and Timex's own name, fairly or not, reads as something closer to your dad's reliable old watch. The brand isn't really selling engineering here. It's selling the emotional gap between those two impressions, and pricing itself accordingly. Have you ever compared a Guess price tag to a Timex one, side by side, in the same store? Try it next time. Picture standing at that counter for a second. The Guess display sits under better lighting, closer to the mirrors, dressed up with a leather catalog and a mannequin wrist. The Timex rack is 3 aisles over, under planar fluorescence, next to the batteries and the travel alarm clocks. Nothing about the watches themselves earned that difference in staging. The staging is the entire product. A teenager saving up birthday money for months to afford the Guess logo on their wrist isn't chasing a better movement. They're chasing what that logo says at school, at a first job interview, in a photo. That's a completely normal human thing to want. It just isn't the same thing as buying a better watch, and the brand counts on nobody stopping to separate the two. Walk the resale numbers and that gap collapses fast. A Guess watch bought for $120 typically lists for $20 to $30 used within a year or two, roughly what a comparable Timex fetches secondhand, because underneath the branding, that's essentially what it already was. The premium doesn't survive contact with a resale market that has stopped looking at the dial font and started looking at what's actually ticking. None of this makes Guess watches badly built, to be fair. Timex has manufactured reliable, inexpensive quartz movements for the better part of a century, dating back to its roots as the Waterbury Clock Company in Connecticut. That's a genuine strength, not an insult. The problem was never the watch itself. It's the story wrapped around it, and what that story is actually worth once you know who's standing behind the curtain. Guess has even tried to climb out of this exact trap once already, launching a step-up line called GC, short for Guess Collection, positioned as the more serious, more Swiss cousin to the main range. The instinct behind that move tells you everything. Even the brand itself seemed to sense that the core Guess name had a ceiling, and the fix wasn't better engineering underneath. It was another label stacked on top of the first one, which is a little like solving a trust problem by adding a second promise instead of keeping the first. Guess isn't the only fashion house wearing a Timex underneath its dial. It isn't even the most expensive one. 3. Versace. If Guess is the entry-level version of this trick, Versace is the same move, played for considerably higher stakes. Versace's timepiece line is also produced under license by Timex Group. Same manufacturer that builds Guess. Same manufacturer sitting a few feet away from the Weekender display. The difference is, the number printed on the price tag, which for Versace routinely runs into the several hundred to low $1,000 range, built on a name associated with red carpet couture and Italian luxury heritage rather than budget reliability. This is where it stops being funny and starts being almost impressive. Honestly, somewhere, a Timex executive signed a licensing deal that lets the exact same manufacturing infrastructure serve both a $30 Weekender and an $800 Medusa head chronograph. And both sides of that business work. That isn't a flaw in the system. That's the system operating precisely as designed, for Timex's factory utilization and for Versace's margins alike. Look at the actual lineup and the pattern holds across the board. The V-Race chronograph, the Greca Time, the Medusa Infinite. different collections, different marketing campaigns, all licensed through the same manufacturing relationship, all priced as though the Medusa head itself were doing mechanical work inside the case. None of these watches are poorly assembled. Timex knows how to build a reliable quartz watch better than almost anyone on Earth. What none of them are is worth the multiple Versace charges over what the exact same manufacturing relationship charges under its own name 3 aisles over. But think about who actually foots that difference. A shopper standing in front of a glass case sees an Italian fashion crest and a case marked Swiss Quartz, or something close to it, and reasonably assumes a meaningful chunk of that price reflects genuine Swiss watchmaking heritage. It doesn't. It reflects licensing fees, marketing budgets, and a retail markup calibrated to whatever the Medusa logo can survive charging, not what the internals actually cost to produce. That's the real trick these two brands share. It isn't that they're poorly made watches. It's that the price gap between them and their unbranded manufacturer has almost nothing to do with what's inside the case, and everything to do with what's printed on the dial. I keep coming back to this pairing more than any other on the list, honestly, because it's so clean. Somewhere, a Versace box sits, wrapped under a Christmas tree, and the person opening it will feel like they've just received a piece of Milan. What they're actually unwrapping, rolled off production lines that also build a watch their grandfather might wear to the hardware store on a Saturday. Nobody at that Christmas morning table is going to say any of this out loud. That's rather the point of a gift like this one. The story is the gift, and the story doesn't come with a receipt attached. Versace, at least, has a real fashion pedigree standing behind the name. The next brand once had genuine horological credibility, and the watch community now has a specific, unkind nickname for exactly what happened to it. Franck Muller. For roughly a decade, starting in the mid-90s, Franck Muller actually mattered. The brand's Cintre Curvex case shape was distinctive in a market full of round cases. Its in-house complications, including perpetual calendar tourbillons built entirely at its own Geneva workshop, nicknamed Watchland, were the real thing. Produced by actual watchmakers doing actual difficult work. Collectors who remember that era still talk about what they call pre-2000s Franck Muller with something close to reverence. That history matters, because it makes what came next harder to wave away as something that was always a scam. As the brand expanded, annual production climbed toward roughly 40,000 watches, a volume closer to a mainstream Swiss manufacturer than a boutique independent maker. For comparison, a truly small independent like FP Journe produces a tiny fraction of that number in a year. To hit that kind of scale at every price point, entry-level Franck Muller models increasingly leaned on outsourced ETA and Sellita movements, the same workhorse calibers found in watches costing a tenth of the price, while the branding and pricing stayed firmly planted in master watchmaker territory. The community noticed. And the community, as it tends to do, coined a name for it: the Master of Deception, a direct twist on the brand's own long-running tagline, Master of Complications. So what does that reputation actually cost an owner trying to sell? One Watch You Seek member described bringing a Conquistador King chronograph in for valuation and being quoted roughly 20% of the original retail price, not after decades of hard use, but within a fairly normal ownership window. Another thread, discussing the brand's broader trajectory, put it plainly: the resale strength simply isn't there anymore, gold case or not. Lingering associations with a scandal-marked stretch of the brand's history in the early 2000s still shadow conversations about it today, more than 20 years on, and collectors have their own shorthand for the divide. Watches from before that period get called pre-2000s Franck Muller, almost like a separate brand wearing the same name. Here's the part that stings if you actually loved the brand once. The Cintre Curvex case is still actually beautiful. The complicated pieces, when Franck Muller bothers to build them properly, still show real watchmaking underneath the theatrics. But that's precisely what makes the entry-tier models feel like a bait-and-switch. The halo earned by the good watches gets quietly borrowed to sell the disappointing ones, and most buyers never learn the difference until the day they try to sell. Walk into a Franck Muller boutique today, and the Vanguard and Casablanca lines still dominate the window, oversized numerals sprawling across the dial in that unmistakable, slightly warped typeface the brand made famous. It photographs beautifully. On a wrist under boutique lighting, next to a salesperson explaining master watchmaker heritage, it's easy to forget you're looking at a case that, on the entry models, houses the same engine as watches costing a tenth as much. Even the model names lean into the theater of it. Master Banker, with its 3 time zones for a jet-setting life most buyers will never actually live. Long Island, borrowing a name from old money geography it has no real connection to. Somewhere, someone is quietly listing a Franck Muller they paid full retail for, watching the offers trickle in at a fifth of what they spent, wondering what exactly they were buying that day in the boutique. The honest answer is that they bought 2 different things at once, bundled into a single price. One was a case shape and a complication that, on the right reference, is still worth admiring. The other was a story about mastery that the entry-level movement inside couldn't actually back up, and nobody at the counter was going to volunteer which one they were really paying for. Franck Muller fell from something that used to be real. Brand number 1 never had to fall, because serious collectors already knew what it was the whole time. Millions of people bought it anyway. 1. Gucci. Remember the phrase from the very first entry on this list: Swiss-made quartz, built to survive being dropped, not to be admired. Gucci uses almost that exact language today on the biggest name this countdown has, to justify watches priced between $1,200 and $2,000 or more. Gucci is a fashion house, not a dedicated watchmaker, and for most of its modern watch history, it leaned entirely on off-the-shelf quartz movements, dressed up in stainless steel, and the occasional horsebit detail, borrowed from its leather goods line. There was never any mechanical reason for the $2,000 price tag. There was only the crest. As of 2021, the brand did start adding some genuine in-house Swiss automatic movements to select collections, a real, if fairly belated, response to years of exactly the criticism you're about to hear. Credit where it belongs. That shift means a portion of the current lineup now stands on real watchmaking rather than pure branding. But it arrived only after decades of margin built almost entirely on the strength of the crest, and the older, far more common quartz pieces still dominate resale listings and secondhand racks everywhere. Here's a line from a watch enthusiast forum, paraphrased but not softened in the slightest. The internal mechanism of a Timex and the internal mechanism of your Gucci are, more often than not, functionally the same thing. Quartz is quartz. What actually differs between the 2 watches is a name that costs you roughly the other 95% of the price. Genuine question for the comments. Would you spend $2,000 on a watch mechanism you could replace for $9 at a hobby shop? This is, in fairness, a deliberate strategy across the entire luxury fashion industry, not a Gucci-specific flaw. Watches and small leather goods function as the entry point into a brand most people can never afford a full closet from. A $2,000 watch feels almost reasonable next to a $12,000 handbag from the same house, and buying it lets someone feel connected to that world without the full cost of admission. It's a smart piece of category strategy for Gucci's business. It just has almost nothing to do with the quality of the thing being sold to make it work. The resale data backs up the frustration. Gucci watches from decades past, pieces that once retailed for $600 or $700, now change hands for $100 to $200 in comparable condition, a depreciation curve steeper than almost anything else on this list. Part of the reason is sheer volume. Gucci and a handful of comparable fashion houses have released so many minor variations on the same core design, the horsebit, the G Timeless, the Diamantissima, that no single reference ever becomes scarce enough to hold real value. A commodity that never runs low in supply eventually behaves like a commodity, no matter what the dial says or which crest sits above 6 o'clock. Picture the 2 buyers standing side by side for a moment. One walks out of the mall with an ice watch and zero illusions about what they just bought. The other walks out of a Gucci boutique with a shopping bag, a receipt, and a quiet, sincere belief that they've just purchased a piece of Italian watchmaking heritage. Only one of those 2 people is actually wrong about what's sitting on their wrist. And that's the whole story of this list, told in miniature. Icewatch never hid what it was. Gucci didn't have to, because the name did the hiding for it. The gap between a $15 plastic cube and a $2,000 horsebit clasp was never craftsmanship. It's a story, and a very good one, told by people whose entire job is making sure you never stop to ask what's ticking underneath it. Once you've spotted that trick in one name on this list, you start noticing it in almost every logo that's doing more talking than the movement underneath it. If you've owned one of these 7, which one was it? Let me know in the comments. Smash that like button and subscribe for more.